Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I'd like to talk to you about socialized medicine. I've got a little blurb here I'm going to read you. This is first-hand account from Soviet Russia, the 1930s. It's Behind the Urals by John Scott. This is an American worker in Russia's city of steel. He was born in Wisconsin, I think it is, and moved there during the Stalin Revolution. His parents were staunch socialists. In America, they raised this child. In the 1930s, this kid's 19 or 20, and America's in the Great Depression, and he sees Russia across the world as the idealistic place to be, and he goes there voluntarily into Stalin's slave pen to help build Magnitogorsk, the city of steel, where they found huge seams of iron ore and huge seams of coal 40 miles apart, as in the middle of nowhere on the Russian steppe, where it's 40 below in the winter and 30 below in the spring and fall. And they built a steel plant there at an enormous cost, and he talks about 120,000 peasants arrive on the steppe, and they say, when the whistle blows in the morning, come to work. And the peasants look around and say, what are we asleep? And they're like, when the whistle blows in the morning, come to work. So very quickly everyone builds sod houses, and lumber of any kind to build a roof becomes highly valuable, and as a result you can't get lumber on the construction site because it's all being stolen to be used in the hovels that the people are living in, because there was no provision at all for where they would live, because they're basically slaves, and if they're not slaves, they're volunteer slaves, like this guy. Now at this work site, eventually they start building some barracks and things, and they have a dentist, actually, eventually. In 1935, I had my first siege with a Soviet dentist. Galia was a 19-year-old girl, born in a village. She attended a country school for 3 years, then moved to a town where she worked as a maid, and finally took a 2-year rush course in dentistry. Thus equipped, she was sent to Magnitogorsk to help in the monumental task of repairing the teeth of 250,000 Russians and others. She meant well, but obviously lacked training, and furthermore did not have at her disposal the equipment, both mechanical and pharmaceutical, considered necessary in most countries for the practice of dentistry. I do not remember what it was she used to extract a nerve from one of my teeth, but it certainly felt like a hacksaw. Another tooth, Galia said, must come out. She told me to report at the clinic at a given time when the specialized extractor of teeth held sway. I came a few minutes early and found a queue of some 20 people sitting in chairs along the side of the corridor leading to the dentist's office. I took my seat at the end of the line and waited. Every minute or so the door would open, a pale patient would come out, spit furtively into a large blood-bespattered spittoon near the door, and leave the clinic sucking his handkerchief. The next in line would get up unsteadily and disappear into the dentist's office. When I was halfway down the line, a nurse in a dirty white apron approached me surreptitiously with a large hypodermic syringe in her hand. "Which tooth, comrade?" she said. I showed her, and she put a shot of something into my jawbone that made my head spin. What I was 2 places removed from the door, the dentist himself emerged. He was a husky, black-haired man of 35, sleeves rolled up, horn-rimmed glasses splattered with blood. He walked to the end of the corridor, took half a dozen drags of a cigarette, then stalked back without looking to either side. When my turn came, I went in, and before I had time to sit down in the dentist's chair, a nurse had brought a tray on which a newly sterilized pair of dental pliers and several other instruments lay, while another nurse had tied a dirty apron around my neck. "Which tooth, comrade?" said the dentist, picking up his pliers in one hand and a chisel in the other. I showed him, and before I had time to collect myself, the tooth was lying on the tray with the pliers, the apron had been taken from my neck, and still another nurse had made her appearance, bearing a tray with freshly sterilized instruments for the next patient. I went out of the door and spat in the spittoon. From the standpoint of dental technique, I suppose the extraction was very well done. The dentist certainly had plenty of practice, and elementary rules of sterilization had been observed. But psychologically, it was a grueling experience. There was not enough dentists in Magnitogorsk, or for that matter in the Soviet Union. Most of them worked 2 shifts a day and earned 800 to 1200 rubles a month. So there is Soviet dentistry for you. Free, 1930s. You go into their office and they say, which tooth do we pull out for you? That's fine. They know, they're not going to do a filling or anything like that. But they do give you a shot of something that makes your head spin. That's good, I guess. Now, if you want to know the worst side of it, in Russia, at least you could get your tooth pulled. But what if you had a worse problem? What if your kidney was failing or your leg was broken? Was there health care available? No. They could give you a shot of something to make your head spin and take some pliers and yank a tooth out. But real health care in Canada today is in shortage. Now there's a video in my favorites, and just do me this one favor, anybody who's in favor of socialized medicine or one-payer health system, anybody who thinks Canada's doing anything right, or anyone who thinks America's system is wrong, and it is, it should be totally free, we should get the government out of it. But anyone who wants any more government control, go to my favorites and watch the video titled 2 Women. 2 Women. And it's just about a couple of women and the Canadian health system. A single-payer health system. Everybody in Canada has a right to health care. As a result of that, Canadians come south of the border in droves and pay for health care in America. Not everybody has the luxury of traveling down to the United States for health care. Not everyone has the money to pay our exorbitant prices, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them come down here for health care because there's a shortage in Canada because you have a right to it. Now, rights should be negative, not positive. A right should say what people cannot do to you. You have a right to life, which means people can't violate you. A right to liberty, which again means they can't violate you. And a right to property, which again means people can't violate you. That's what rights are. When you say you have a right to health care, that means a doctor now has to wear a set of chains because you have a right to his life. And that leads to a really cannibalistic and disgusting system, which you have in Canada today. And if you want that in America, think twice about it. Read up on freedom and capitalism first before you vote the rest of the nation into a system of slavery where we have to put up with reduced quality health care. Oh, it's free? Dostoevsky said, if you give a man bread, he'll wear chains.
Both he and his doctor suspected a possible brain tumor. He needed an MRI fast. How long was the wait?
4 months before we could get our first MRI here in Ontario.
The McCreaths wanted to pay to get an MRI rather than wait 4 months for the government to provide one. However, Ontario Minister of Health George Smitherman is a staunch defender of a single-payer healthcare system and won't allow private payment for medical services. So in their hour of desperation, the McCreaths called private medical broker Rick Baker.
Bear in mind, if you have a suspected brain tumor, it's really important you find out if in fact you do have a brain tumor, and beyond that it's very important to find out if it's malignant or if it's benign. They were waiting 4.5 months to get this an MRI. Came to us on the 2nd of February of 06. On the 3rd of February they were down in Buffalo. They got an MRI which indeed showed that Lindsay had a brain tumor.
He had a mass in his brain that was the size of a golf ball.
He came back to Canada with his MRI in his hand, went to see his family doctor. He was given a May the 27th date to see a neurosurgeon. Now this is back on the 3rd of February.
I was angry at the waiting of 3 months